There are some things you can only learn by loving another woman. And no is not about desire or labels or what people think a relationship should look like. It's about something subtle but deep, something that touches places inside you no one else ever did. If you've ever thought you were in love before but still felt unseen, disconnected, or empty, maybe this video is exactly what you needed to hear. Lessons I learned from loving another woman is a confession, a journey through discovery, freedom, and healing. Take a deep breath and stay with me until the end. Sometimes, what we need the most is a space where our feelings can finally exist, without fear, without shame, and without having to split ourselves in half to be accepted. In a relationship between women, touch doesn't come with pressure, affection isn't a form of currency, and lesbian love doesn't have to be constantly proven. In this kind of connection, affection stops being a tense space and becomes a refuge, a quiet language that gently says, "I'm here." Over time, I realized that loving another woman could be soft, calm, and most importantly, I could be whole, without having to split myself just to be accepted. So many studies show that in relationships between women, there's more emotional exchange than in any other kind of love. And that's not by accident. There's active listening, emotional presence, and above all, a genuine intention to care. This kind of emotional connection between women has something quietly revolutionary about it. Something only those who've lived it or dared to open themselves to queer affection can truly understand. It's like two souls meeting without rush at the exact pace of feeling. And when that affection feels safe, it begins to heal. It heals the woman who spent years pretending to be fine in relationships where her voice was silenced. It heals the body that was taught to stay quiet. It heals the soul that only ever knew love as urgency and scarcity. Loving as a queer woman, with truth, becomes a liberating experience. A sapphic relationship becomes a space without bars, where you slowly realize you no longer have to hide to exist. For a long time, I'd look in the mirror and think I had to fix something, be more feminine, more delicate, more desirable in the eyes of a man. But when I fell in love with a woman, I realized that in a relationship between women, there's no pressure to fit in. Loving as a queer woman feels like an invitation to take off the masks and slowly live your own truth. There's no need to perform sensuality all the time or hide your vulnerability behind a practiced smile. The connection between lesbian, bi, or queer women is built on presence, and that's when I learned what it felt like to be truly loved. I still remember the day I showed up at her place wearing a hoodie, no makeup, no filter, and she looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. That's when I knew I didn't have to perform anymore. Queer psychology talks about how gender performance shapes behavior, desire, even how we connect. But in lesbian love, those layers start to fall away, one by one. It's like the freedom to love comes hand in hand with the freedom to exist. And little by little, I began to understand that loving another woman also meant relearning what it means to be a woman, without restraints, without a stage. And the more I let go of those old expectations, the closer I got to my truest self. For years, I believed intimacy was just about touch, about the body, about desire. I grew up in a culture that said love is proven in bed and that a connection between two people depends on how far they go physically. But the first time I was with a woman, I discovered that loving another woman is also about sharing silence, telling secrets, receiving a look that truly listens. And that, more than anything, is the deepest kind of intimacy, the kind that can exist even before the first kiss. Affection between women shows up in many forms. It's a cup of coffee made with care, a blanket handed over without being asked, a quiet, "How are you really?" in the middle of the day. This kind of connection challenges everything we were taught about what love should look like. When two women love each other, touch isn't invasive, it's a language. And conversation isn't something you owe, it's a living exchange. Loving another lesbian, bi, or queer woman means creating space for emotional intimacy to grow slowly and gently. In affirming sexology, there's a lot of talk about how desire is born from trust, safety, and emotional presence. And that's exactly what I learned with another woman. The most intimate moment I've ever lived wasn't when we took off our clothes, but when I said quietly and unsure, "I'm afraid I'm not enough." And she answered without hesitation, "You don't have to be anything more than you already are." Loving outside the box taught me that the real pleasure isn't just being desired, it's being fully seen, with tenderness and still being chosen. I'll never forget the first time I felt afraid because I loved another woman. It wasn't fear of love, it was fear of being seen, of walking down the street holding her hand and catching the sideways glances, the whispered jokes, the tension hanging in the air. Loving as a lesbian, bi, or queer woman is living a freedom that's always being watched, quietly policed. That fear doesn't come from love itself. It comes from a world that still treats love between women as something that should be hidden. That's when I realized that in a relationship between women, there's a different kind of strength. It doesn't come from resistance, but from protection. Two women creating a space of care and softness. When one breaks down, the other holds. When one is scared, the other comforts. And in that exchange of mutual support, I learned that loving outside the norm isn't weak. It's strong in a quiet way, built on presence, empathy, and deep listening. Through bonds formed in places of adversity, I came to understand that loving another woman also means building a refuge from fear. Her love became a place where I could see myself with dignity, with beauty, with truth. And it was in that love that I finally began to recognize that I deserve to be loved out loud. Before I loved another woman, I had a habit of shrinking myself. I was always trying to please, to serve, to not cause trouble. I thought I had to shape myself to be in a relationship, like loving someone meant fitting into their expectations. But when I allowed myself to be in a relationship with another woman, I understood that real love doesn't shrink, it expands. It was in that exchange that I learned I didn't need to abandon myself just to keep someone close. Reciprocity is the foundation of a queer relationship. When two women show up with care and presence, they're not there as incomplete halves. They come together as whole people, and that changes everything. It was through that gentle shift that I started saying yes to myself. Not a loud yes with dramatic declarations, but a quiet, everyday kind of yes. Like the moment I said, "This bothers me," without guilt, or when I claimed a space just for me, without fear of seeming distant. And maybe the most powerful thing I've realized is this: true love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your essence. It holds it, honors it, and teaches you how to choose yourself too. If you've made it this far, maybe you're going through something similar or carrying a feeling that hasn't had space to be expressed yet. What part of you started to bloom when you were in a relationship with another woman? Share your story. Sometimes just telling what you went through can already hold space for another woman who doesn't even know where to begin. Leave a comment and tell us, what lessons did you learn from loving another woman? What did you discover about yourself along the way? There's so much healing in turning what you feel into words, and even more in seeing others feel less alone because of it. If this video touched something in you, like it, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel. Here, you'll find more stories that hold you, reflect what you feel, and say out loud the things you might have never heard anyone speak before. Love between women is powerful because it lives in the way we listen, in the respectful touch, in the comfort of silence. Loving another woman is about showing up fully. It's turning the ordinary into care and the routine into tenderness. It's transformation. This kind of love doesn't follow a script. It doesn't fit into rules. It doesn't ask for justification. It just is. And that's exactly why it has the power to heal, to rebuild, and to re-enchant everything you thought you knew about love. And once you've lived this kind of love, you never go back to being the same. Because after you've been loved by someone who sees every part of you, truly sees you, it becomes impossible to accept a love that only meets you halfway. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle of this journey, or just starting to look at what you feel with a little more kindness. What matters is that, little by little, you're learning how to exist more truthfully. And loving another woman can be that turning point, the moment that brings up questions you finally feel brave enough to ask. If there's one thing this kind of love teaches, it's how to let yourself feel. And when that happens, something new begins to grow inside us, a quiet peace that doesn't need to be justified, only welcomed. If this video touched something in you, share it with someone who might also be trying to understand their own path. Like it, subscribe, and stay close. Here, you don't have to hide to recognize yourself. And believe me, the most beautiful part of all this is still on its way.